This is chapter 2. This chapter explains the ethical issues faced by researchers. Learning objectives include this: to understand what issues are covered in research ethics, the goal of no harm for all research activities, and what constitutes no harm for a participant, for the researcher, and the research sponsor. You'll need to understand differing ethical dilemmas and responsibilities of researchers, sponsors, and research assistants. You'll learn the role of ethical codes of conduct in professional associations. Just by way of example, for ideas for using this research-generated statistic, for example, 89% of consumers' PCs are infected with spyware. Now, spyware is a program that marketers will use to find out information about consumers. It is a deceptive practice. So people who collect data face this dilemma of rights to privacy, privacy issues, balanced with the need to know information to make better marketing decisions. Ethics are norms or standards of behavior that guide moral choices about our behavior and our relationships with others. The goal of ethics in research is to ensure that no one is harmed or suffers adverse consequences from research activities. Unethical activities are pervasive and include many types of activities. Some of these are listed in the slide. For some researchers, ethical and legal norms are the same. The textbook authors feel that legal constraints are the minimum standard, but not the ideal. So everything from violating disclosure agreements, breaking confidentiality, padding invoices, misrepresenting results, deceiving participants, and avoiding legal liability. In April 2001, Procter & Gamble notified its competitor Unilever that more than 80 discarded documents detailing Unilever's marketing plan for its hair care business had been collected by Procter & Gamble information agents. Unilever sought financial restitution and restriction on Procter & Gamble's marketing activities, but the two companies settled out of court. There is no single approach to ethics. Deontology advocates that ethical behavior should be directed by duties regardless of the positive circumstances that might result from behavior that is in contradiction to the duty. An example might be, do not lie, even when lying might result in a positive outcome. Another approach is that of ethical relativism. Ethical relativism is based on an individual sense of morality. Therefore, each person decides for his or herself what is ethical behavior. A middle ground is necessary and provided through ethical standards of behavior for researchers. How would you assess the Procter & Gamble case using the two ethical approaches of deontology and ethical relativism? Three organizations offering codes specifically for researchers are the Marketing Research Association, the American Marketing Association, and the Council for American Survey Research Organizations. The logos in the slides are linked to the respective organizations' websites where you can view the codes of ethics. I would suggest that you type in Google the name of the organization since the links are not hot in your video. So this is just one example in millions of dollars of the amount that employers will lose because of employee fraud this year. Exhibit 2-1 highlights the many ethical issues that arise at all stages of the research process. So we have our research design that we looked at in chapter 1. This figure here and this design and diagram is going to be used throughout the book. So in this particular instance, in this particular chapter, these different stages of the process are correlated with different ethical issues and decisions that one may face. Research must be designed so that a participant does not suffer physical harm, discomfort, pain, embarrassment, or loss of privacy. This slide lists the 3 guidelines that researchers should follow to protect participants. When discussing benefits, the researcher should be careful not to overstate or understate the benefits. Informed consent means that the participant has given full consent to participation after receiving full disclosure of the procedures of the proposed study. Exhibit 2.2 illustrates the informed consent procedures used by the Indiana Center for Survey Research. The components highlighted in its procedures are listed in the slide. Identify the researchers, that has to be done. You have to describe the topic. You have to describe the target sample. You have to identify any outside sponsor. Describe the purpose of the research and promise anonymity and confidentiality to all participants. You have to give a good faith estimate of required time commitment for participants and state to participants that their participation is voluntary. You also have to state that if they do not want to respond to any questions, that is acceptable, and you ask for permission. Since 1966, all projects with federal funding are required to be reviewed by an Institutional Review Board, or the IRB. An IRB evaluates the risks and benefits of proposed research. The review requirement may be more relaxed for projects that are unlikely to be risky, such as marketing research projects, especially surveys. Many institutions require that all research, whether funded or unfunded by the federal government, must be reviewed by the local IRB. The IRB concentrate on 2 areas. First is the guarantee of obtaining complete informed consent from participants. The second is risk assessment and benefit analysis review. Complete informed consent has 4 characteristics, and these are named in the slide. Number 1, the participant must be competent to give consent. Number 2, consent must be voluntary and free from coercion. Number 3, participants must be adequately informed to make the decision. And number 4, the participants should know the possible risks or outcomes associated with the research. Special consideration is necessary when researching the behavior and attitudes of children. Besides providing informed consent, parents are often interviewed during the selection process to ensure that the child is mature enough and has the verbal and physical capabilities necessary to participate in the research study. Deception such as disguising non-research activities when they actually are research, or camouflaging the true research objectives, those are frowned upon in research. In situations where participants are intentionally or accidentally deceived, they should be debriefed once the research is complete. So there may be instances where the true identity of the research purpose has to be concealed in order for the research to be effective. If the participant knew in advance exactly what the researcher was measuring, that may alter their behavior or their responses, therefore tainting the research and making it invalid. So sometimes they are intentionally misdirected, but if that is the case, once the research is complete, they must be debriefed and advised of all the procedures involved. Debriefing describes the goals of the research as well as the truth and the reasons for any deception. Results are shared after the study is complete. Participants who require any medical or psychological follow-up attention will receive it during the debriefing process. All individuals have a right to privacy, and researchers must respect that right. Once a guarantee of confidentiality is given, protecting that confidentiality is essential. Researchers protect participant confidentiality in several ways. Number 1, by obtaining signed non-disclosure documents. Only researchers who have signed non-disclosure forms should be allowed to access the data. Number 2, restricting access to participant identification. Number 3, revealing participant information only with written consent. Number 4, restricting access to data instruments where the participant is identified. And number 5, non-disclosure of data subsets. Now, methods 2 through 5 deal with minimizing the chance for a participant to be identified and matched with his or her responses. Links between data and identifying information must be minimized. Interview response sheets should be inaccessible to everyone except the editors and the people who enter the data. Data collection instruments may be destroyed once the data are an electronic file. For very small groups, data should not be made available if it would be easy to pinpoint a person within the group. The right to privacy includes the right for someone to decline or refuse to cooperate or participate in any type of survey or research project. Right of privacy also requires prior permission before interviewing someone. You must disclose as much as you can about the project before interviewing someone. You must also limit the amount of time that's required for a participant to complete whatever the task is. The convenience of collecting data online has created some new ethical issues. It has reduced the cost. That's one great benefit, but it has also raised some new ethical issues. Data mining, in particular. It does offer infinite possibilities for marketing, but also for research abuse. Primary ethical data mining issues in cyberspace are privacy related, including consent to information collection and control of information dissemination. Legitimate data miners publicly post their information security policies. So, for example, when you visit places on a website and information is collected about you and what you do, and then that is passed along to other people, there are concerns about privacy, there are restrictions, and the laws and the courts are still trying to hammer out what is considered ethical and what is not. The European Union countries have passed the European Commission's Data Protection Directive. Under the directive, commissioners can prosecute companies and block websites that fail to live up to strict privacy standards. This slide here identifies the 7 basic principles that companies must comply with to be granted immunity from legal action under the European Union's directive. These 7 principles are: notice. Companies must notify consumers or participants about when information is being collected, how that information will be used, who that information will be shared with, and how individuals can contact the organization with inquiries or complaints. Number 2, choice. Consumers or participants must be provided with an opt-out mechanism for any secondary uses of data and for disclosure to third parties. For sensitive information, participants must opt in before providing data that will be shared. Number 3, access. Individuals must have access to personal information that the organization holds and be able to correct, amend, or delete information where it is inaccurate, except where the burden or expense of providing access would be disproportionate to the risks to the individual's privacy. Number 4, security. Organizations must take reasonable precautions to protect personal information from loss, misuse, and unauthorized access, disclosure, alteration, and destruction. Number 5, onward transfer. Companies disclosing personal data to a third party must adhere to the notice and choice principles. A third party must subscribe to the safe harbor principles. Number 6, data integrity. Reasonable steps must be taken to ensure that data collected are reliable, accurate, complete, and current. And number 7, enforcements. Companies must ensure they are readily available and affordable independent mechanisms to investigate any consumer complaints. Confidentiality is an important aspect of research ethics. Occasionally, researchers may be asked by sponsors to participate in unethical behavior. What can the researcher do to remain ethical? There are 4 suggestions provided in the slide. The researcher can attempt to, number 1, educate the sponsor on the purpose of the research. Number 2, explain the researcher's role as fact finder. Number 3, explain how distorting the truth or breaking faith will lead to future problems. And number 4, if all others fail, then you must terminate the relationship with the sponsor. Many organizations have a code of ethics. A code of ethics is an organization's codified set of norms or standards of behavior that guide moral choices about research behavior. Effective codes are those that are regulative, protect the public interest and interest of the profession served by the code. 3 are behavior specific, and 4 are enforceable. And the key terms that we've covered in this chapter: code of ethics, confidentiality, debriefing, which occurs after the research is done, deception, ethics, informed consent, non-disclosure, the right to privacy, the right to quality, and the right to safety. And this concludes Chapter 2.